Putin seems to be implacable. He doesn't care about the damage being done to Russia. He doesn't care about the casualties or the money because he knows that he can't change course. And if we're not willing to fight Russia directly, which is, I think, correct, then it's enabling Ukraine to carry on fighting and taking the battle not just on the front line, but actually to deeper inside Russia.
I mean, there was a lot of excitement recently about Donald Trump asserting that Ukraine can win, can retake all its territory, that Russia's a paper tiger. It's been nothing but words, though, hasn't it? No ceasefire, no Tomahawk missiles yet that people are getting excited about. It's said he likes a winner. Why won't he help make one?
We were discussing this earlier this week. Trump's position has been baffling. He had this whole razzmatazz during the election campaign that he alone could bring peace and do it quickly within a day, in a week, a month. It's all turned out to be extremely difficult. His position is baffling because nothing ever happens. So I don't think we should hold our breath for a change of position. I think in Trump's message about Ukraine can win, he said, "Oh, good luck to you," as if it was like a sort of bemused bystander rather than leader of the free world. And I think you could compare and contrast the other big news story in the headlines about potential peace between Israel and Hamas and Gaza. Seems to be an astonishing breakthrough, which has been preceded by months and months and months of careful diplomacy and use of other nations, Egypt and Turkey and Qatar, and the Americans bringing full weight of American power on the issue, but on both sides to say, look, it's time to settle and get this done. And compare that to what the American approach over Ukraine, which has been half-hearted and weak and confused and capricious, which has led nowhere. So I think, back to your question, the ramp up of unconventional warfare, political warfare, I think is linked to the fact that we're just going to be at this for another year. There's no time to go wobbly on Ukraine, and also it's up for Europe, small e, to step up and play its part if the United States is not prepared to do that.
And notably, Ukraine just gets on with it. It continues to pound the Russian oil refineries with its long-range air campaign. Kyiv Independent now reports that restrictions on gasoline sales have now extended to a fourth region in Russia. How long do you think it can be before this does have a noticeable impact on Russia's capacity to finance the war?
Well, I think firstly, I'm glad that Ukraine is managing to have a sustained deep operations campaign against Russian oil refineries. And it seems to be having an impact on gas prices, and it's bringing home the war to Russian nationals to say they can't be moved from this. Putin's decisions leading to you not being able to travel around your country to have oil. Now, do these strikes actually lead to further economic problems? I'm not so sure. I think there's a sort of inconvenience side, but does it actually dissuade Putin from waging his war? No. Is he going to change his course? Probably not. Are there more measures that the central bank and the finance ministry can take in terms of running a greater deficit, i.e. taking on more debt, cutting spending elsewhere, using up the National Reserve? Yes, they can. So, and of course, they've still got China on their side, who's helping them support it. They're still getting arms in from North Korea. They're still trading oil products around the world via the Shadow Fleet. So places like India, who haven't haven't been dissuaded by Trump's secondary sanctions. So, I think it's all to play for. The jury's out, I think, on this moment where Russian economy collapses. There's no doubt that Russia's under severe economic difficulties. But I don't think that Ukrainian drone strikes are going to bring about a collapse of the Russian economy on their own. Only concerted international action will do that.
And there is increasing optimism, though, in terms of an agreement becoming close on releasing the 200 billion or some of the 200 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets being held in Europe to fund the reparations loan to Ukraine and to repay an earlier G7 loan. How much difference, if that money is released, would that make to Ukraine's ability to survive?
Well, again, 3.5 years, we froze the assets in 2022, and here we are at the end of 2025 still discussing it. Now, I get why there's concerns by financiers about stability international system, about just taking the capital, but actually using it. The prime, shall we say, for loans, I think strikes me as a good way through it. I think we will get there. But again, I think if Ukraine needs money and support, then let's use that Russian money somehow to get Ukraine the money it needs. Let's say there's about 40 to 50 billion a year. So you're going to burn through that if it's 200, 300 billion quite quickly. But also sort of keep the wolf from the door. I mean, it also means that Ukraine won't have to go to nations individually and say, give us some more money, especially if the IMF or the World Bank aren't there to provide money by that path. So I think it's well overdue. Like most things, we could have been much clearer on our political objective in 2022 and 23, which would have driven action on sanctions, on arms, on use of Russian assets, much, much earlier, on stopping of Russian diplomats or on diplomatic presence around Europe, rather than it dribbling out and sort of 3.5 years later we're still talking about it.
Do you get any feeling, though, that there is any more impetus for when you talk about this kind of like indecision that's lasted 3.5 years? Are you getting any kind of signs of optimism that there's more of a concerted effort to get more proactive, particularly with the fact that Donald Trump may be about to sort of wash his hands of it and leave it to Europe?
Well, I think the big change I would see in Europe is the role of Germany under Chancellor Merz. Especially in comparison or contrast to his predecessor, who is, I agree with Ben Wallace, the wrong man, the wrong place, the wrong time, and then his predecessor, Chancellor Merkel, whose reputation is sort of going down the drain, down the plug hole by the day, especially by accusing the countries in Eastern Europe for some settlement with Russia. So I think German leadership is really interesting, not just about rearmament, but also about financial support, and Germany's really stepping up. I think we know that France has got its own difficulties. The UK's got its own difficulties, the other problems elsewhere. But I think on the whole, the coalition are willing, the political support is there. Countries are leaning in to provide Ukraine with the weapons, and you'll see more and more sort of manufacturing deals, arms deals, training, diplomatic support, political support, which is good, but I think that's the right trajectory. And I think the growth of Germany being to actually assert some leadership after, should we say, 50, 60 years of not being willing to do that is exemplary. And I would applaud Chancellor Merz for doing that.
It's also really important to remember, isn't it, that after 3.5 years and 1 million Russian casualties, Russia still only occupies 20% of Ukraine, and it's not winning. Does Ukraine just simply have to hold on and keep defending those front lines until such circumstances dictate that Russia does want to stop fighting?
Well, it comes down to what's the goal? I mean, is the goal just Ukraine loses slowly or holds on, or is it Ukraine wins or we drive towards some sort of settlement? It's not clear to me what we've actually decided what that is. I mean, it's all well and good, keep supporting Ukraine to go backwards very slowly, but that doesn't bring any relief to the soldiers of the front line, or indeed Ukraine's been killed in Ukrainian cities. Because we go about to enter another winter, it's going to be another difficult period. We know the Russians are already targeting the Ukrainian energy production and distribution system to try and bring the war home to Ukrainians. But having an open-ended war, which just goes on for another decade, which causes more and more casualties without resolution, I don't think it's in the interest of Ukraine or Russians, Ukrainians or Russians. I don't think it's in the interest of Europeans. I think ultimately we have to decide where we want to be, what we want to achieve, and let's drive towards that rather than just sort of drifting along from crisis to crisis.
And realistically, what do you think that is, the answer?
Well, at the moment, I think for next year, it's Ukraine hanging on. And, I mean, one thing people point to in war is that, wars can change because of circumstances. If you compare our own experience in the Second World War, we had a pretty brutal 3 years until 1943. The first 2-3 years were absolutely terrible for us, but actually things changed, pendulum shifted. But I think Putin seems to be implacable. He doesn't care about the damage being done to Russia. He doesn't care about the casualties or the money because he knows that he can't change course. And if we're not willing to fight Russia directly, which is, I think, correct, then it's enabling Ukraine to carry on fighting and taking the battle not just on the front line, but actually to deeper inside Russia.
I mean, you spoke about Putin at an event earlier this week and believe he has zero incentive for a quick ceasefire or a peace deal. Is there nothing then that can make him negotiate while his motivations for the 2022 invasion are not met?
Well, yes. I mean, I think if you look at this, why he invaded. You know, maybe it's a combination of resentment about Russia's, as he would see it, reduced position after the end of the Cold War, anger at not being treated seriously, a sense of entitlement, chauvinism towards Ukraine as part of Russia proper. Part of his what's his legacy, and he's getting older. Whether you want to be seen in history as a great ruler, the man who brought the Russian Empire, Russia back together again, made Russia great again. So I think waiting for him to change course through the better angels of his heart is highly unlikely. I think we have to keep on imposing political, economic, and military cost onto Russia to drive the point home that the cost benefit analysis for Putin, the costs are going on are so high to him personally or to his regime, are greater the benefits of grinding out one field at a time for the next 3 years. And I think for that you need American leadership, and I'm not sure you're going to get that under Trump, unfortunately.
And President Putin, he was 73 this week, same age as Xi Jinping, and we all remember them being caught off mic recently discussing the science of eternal life. What future do you think Putin now thinks is possible for himself?
I think in 2020, when he changed the constitution, he recognised that he would be dying in office, because he couldn't find a successor within the system who wouldn't go after him or his money or his family. So he had to change the constitution to become president for life, effectively. So he's now got 2 terms. He can serve up to 2036, and there's obviously ways he could carry on doing that. So I think what you're seeing is the Robert Mugabeization of Putin. He's becoming sort of the cult of personalities, sort of father of the nation figure. He reads out badly some poem by Pushkin about the Battle of Borodino, and everybody claps and applauds wildly at his great magnificence and his huge intellect. So I think that's his prospect. His prospect is to remain in power and then die and then leave it to his successor. I think the problem is that every day he remains in office, the chances of bloodshed when he finally dies and his successor comes along increases. Now, I think his successor might not necessarily be so crazed about geopolitics as Putin is, about Ukraine, obsessed about Ukraine. But I think that the chances of a sort of major rapprochement between ourselves and Russia is at least a generation away. I think in the meantime, we have to maintain our security, our defences, and our deterrence against Russia.
John Foreman, great to speak to you. Thank you very much.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com.